What's up, kids? David here with Subtle State, man. We got another vid going on, and this is no doubt part two to what was part one, Atheism, the cosmological question. So, let me begin by stating what I mean by atheism. I don't mean the opposite of religion. I don't mean those that are opposed to Christianity. What I really mean by atheism is that view of reality wherein nature is preeminent. Nature, therefore, in my estimation, in an atheistic worldview, nature is reducible to itself. It is its own axiom. It is its own cause. Its attributes, its parameters, the characteristics therein that are described in the measurements and observations that we make of the natural world of physical reality are caused by nature itself. Theism would be the notion that nature's attributes, nature's cause is arrived at by a volitional, ultimate volitional being, an ultimate engineer, if you will, above time and space, who set nature's parameters, who set nature's effect in motion. An ultimate being who is essentially the axiom, the cause of the crux, the root of the issue. And that is essentially not to suggest, that Christianity is the truth or that some other religion is the truth. It is to suggest this, that consciousness, that the consciousness that we enjoy as living beings has its source, its headwaters in this ultimate being, this engineer above all else. Not that we have not, as conscious living beings, that we have not arisen from the effect of nature, that nature is not our primary reason that we exist. And this is a metaphysical worldview, a way of assessing reality. So in my primary video, I suggested that there is a disingenuous attitude, if you will, amongst the academic community as regards to the evidence that we see in the natural world and natural phenomena that points to this ultimate engineer, this being above time and space, this cause of the natural world. Disingenuous because these attributes that we see, that we measure, are so particularly distinct and purposeful in their value to cause reality to be as specifically as such as we see it. What are these constants? It seems that, I think that there's 26 of them, the constants of nature. Could be wrong, don't stress it. One of which, as an example, is gravity. Gravity has a certain value. That value is 1 in 10 to the 60th parts. What does that mean? That gravity's specific number isn't arbitrary. It's not massive. It's not fudged. It's not blurred. It's very, very specific. 10 to the 60th units. What is 10 to the 60th units? That's 10 with 60 zeros attached, which is a pretty refined number. If you were to alter that number ever so slightly, the primordial, infantile cosmos would diffuse into a cloud, never collapsing into stars, planets, galaxies, etc. Were that very refined number to be ever so slightly stronger, 10 to the 60th parts. So if you were to take one of those minuscule values and increase them ever so slightly, the original infantile cosmos would collapse into black holes. It would have begotten, the Big Bang would have begotten black holes instead of hydrogen-rich crucibles wherein the periodic table was smashed into existence. So what does 10 to the 60th look like? It seems like a very abstract number. For instance, let me give you just some context here. In the human body, there's 10 to the 14th cells in the human body. It's been 10 to the 20th seconds have passed since the Big Bang, 13.5 billion years ago. How many atoms are in the universe? It is estimated that there are 10 to the 78th or 10 to the 82nd, whichever you prefer, atoms in the universe. So when we're talking about 10 to the 60th part units in terms of the value of gravity, we're talking about a number that is beyond. That's why it has to be expressed in exponentially, because the number is too big to write out. You can write it out on a piece of paper, but it's massive. Another most extreme constant in nature, which is also going to be the premise of this video, is the cosmological constant, which also is known, I don't know why, but it's known under various terms. It's also known as dark energy. It's also known as anti-gravity. If you look it up on a table, an index of nature's constants, you might see it listed as the characteristic impedance of vacuum. But it's all the same thing. It's the cosmological constant. It is a number. Its value is extremely specific in its determination. It is 10 to the 120th power. Boom, dude. That is. Let's go through what that is. That is 10 trillion. It's a big number. It's 10 with 120 zeros. There's not even that many atoms in the universe. It is a massive, massive number. What does the cosmological constant do? The cosmological constant, with gravity, if you alter it just ever so slightly, we can see that life is immediately impacted. If you alter the gravitational constant ever so slightly, life is immediately affected. Life cannot be. As regards to the cosmological constant and the effect of altering it, I can't speak to that because I'm not really sure. I have heard cosmologists suggest that if you alter it that life can't be, but I don't quite understand why. But this is what the cosmological constant does. The cosmological constant acts as it's a kind of vacuum energy in empty space. It's the opposite of compression. It doesn't compress, it expands, it pulls, it enlarges. So that's why I say it's like a vacuum. It sucks space into a bigger space. That's the purpose there. That's what that means, a vacuum energy in empty space. It's the effect. That's when they talk about dark energy, pushing, accelerating the universe. That's what they're talking about. It's a negative, constant pressure, sucking the universe outwards into an ever larger. This isn't just the explosive expansion of the Big Bang. This is another type of expansion force added onto that already momentum, if you will. It is a negative pressure. A positive pressure condenses and squeezes. A negative pressure enlarges and increases. Its effect on reality is therefore a stabilizing effect. Because without the cosmological constant, without dark energy's effect, that the natural expansion of the universe would be warped. Certain parts of the universe, space would be, you know, when they show you a grid and they try to explain space and they give you this grid. Well, without the cosmological constant, part of that grid, the squares, certain squares would be smaller and other squares would be larger. And so as a body of space, space would be therefore warped around us. It would be curved and warped. Time would be different on Mars than it is here on the Earth. Time, a smaller square of unit space, time would go by faster. And in a larger square of unit space, time would go by slower. The cosmological constant has the effect, as it expands space, it has the effect of evening out the irregularity of expansion. And it causes space to be flat. That's what they describe it as. So when they say flat, they mean that it evenly is expanding. It makes reality the way that we see it. And it should not be that way. Reality the cosmos shouldn't expand in the way that it does. And yet the cosmological constant acts as a stabilizer on reality. The frick? And it does this by a certain force of value that is determined by units to 10 to the 120th parts. What the frick? How do you explain this? How do you explain this, the tolerances herein described? The engineering, if you will, herein described? Is there an ultimate mechanic who's lifting the hood, if you will, on reality and tapping its parameters to be just so right so that its motor effect may operate in the highest efficiency, priming, if you will, the parameters of reality? Because I must say that the parameters of reality seem highly primed for efficiency, to be efficacious for the prodigious population of living beings. You know, the alternative that is always expanded on, they will say, well, maybe it's God, and then that's it. They will say, maybe it's God, but then they will immediately move over to, and this is why in the original video I was saying it's disingenuous, they will immediately, imagine the possibility, well, maybe there's this multiverse, maybe there is an infinite number of universes, and ours just is so particularly lucky. It's the luck of the odds. You buy enough lottery tickets, someone's going to win. So what that means, what does that look like? That would mean that there is 10 to the 120th universes where one of them got the cosmological constant right. Of course, it doesn't describe all of the other the other 26 constants of nature. So how many universes does there have to be for all of these things to align so prodigiously in our favor? And what does that describe about the larger reality around us? That seems to suppose, number one, it is untestable. People always say, well, you can't test God, you can't prove God, you can't measure God, where's your facts, where's your proof? Man, where is your frickin' proof of the multiverse? Can you measure it? Can you observe it? Can you test it? Can you test your theory against something observable, wherein the multiverse can be conceived as a possible real effect? You can't, because it's outside of our universe. Therefore, it's beyond the measure of our ability to observe it, to test it, to prove our theorems, if you will. It is a ridiculous discussion because it will always only be the fodder of fiction and of comic book imagination, what we theorize the multiverse to be. It is the fanfare of imagination, evading, if you will, the facts, the evidence as we see it. It doesn't mean that you have to conclude that the Bible is true. It doesn't mean that you have to conclude that Buddhism is true or any other religion is true, but you have to conclude. I mean, I'm not telling you what you have to do, but it's reasonable. It is reasonable. Please acknowledge it is reasonable to conclude that there is an ultimate mechanic lifting the hood on reality. It is reasonable to conclude that, because otherwise what you are suggesting is that reality is this massive, unimaginable, 10 to the 500,000th degree of botched, aborted death universes wherein black holes are the dominant feature of reality, wherein void, emptiness, meaningless, infinite stretches of void and oblivion are characteristic of reality. That's kind of grim. That's kind of grim. I kind of like the idea of somebody lifting the hood. Feels more valid, man. It feels more solid. You know what I'm saying? It feels more real. And that's my vid. I'm sorry it went so long. I tried to cram this down. I tried to cram it. Tried to squeeze it into a smaller vid. That's all I can do. Yo, take care. Thanks for watching this. If you were able to make it to 18 minutes, good for you, man. Take care. God bless. Bye.